The Fed met yesterday. Stocks are plummeting. Is a crash going to happen, Steve?
It's time to start letting the markets dictate what happens.
Or letting the economy go into a recession. All right, so listen, dude, the Fed met yesterday, and there's a lot of people. I sent you a video right before we jumped on this, and the dude was talking about a recession that's inevitable. We're talking about inflation. We're talking about is a crash going to happen, Steve? And is it going to be more severe than what we saw in 2008? I want to unpack all of that. So why don't you just give like the viewers just a quick kind of give us some context of where we're at right now from an economy standpoint, how we ended 2021, and then where we're at today, and then we'll unpack what's happened in the last day or so.
Sure. So I think it's best to start with story time.
I love it. I love story time.
Dip back into the Steve Frost family life, and there's one kind of adventure that's always unique with me, and that's when Steve Frost goes on vacation.
So it's like Frost family vacation time. Tell us.
Yeah. So here's how it went, right? So we went to Disney, and I had my kids were young. I mean, this was probably like 7 or 8 years ago. I mean, they were little.
And you still had hair. You still had hair.
That?
You still had hair.
Oh, I was so close to having dreadlocks, like real dreadlocks. That would be like, if I had a full head of like good hair, like that would be my style. I would go 100% do dreadlocks. I think that's the coolest hair. It can be short, it can be long. I probably should have done it when I had a chance, but look, we can't look back like that. So what happened though is we had all these activities, right? We went to like Gatorland and the Crayola town, and we did all these things. And Kelly's like, my wife, she's like, book us a breakfast with the princesses, and like, you can't book anything when you're at Disney because like you're already late. If you're there and you don't have a book, you're late. So I'm like, all right, I'll go in here. I'm like, oh, terrific. I found a breakfast with the princesses at 7. So, and we had rented a house like outside of Disney, right? So it was like a 15-20 minute ride, like, cause we wanted to drive and park and have our car and do all that. So we go to Disney, and everybody's like, man, this is going to suck. Like, it's so early. It's like 6 o'clock in the morning. We're rounding up babies. I got sunblock in my eye, ruined the whole day. I was so rude all day long because of this sunblock.
Oh, that's the worst.
So we get on these trams. We're going, I get all the way to the back of the park to this big castle. Everybody's like, oh, this sucks. Like, there's a wait. Get there, we had to wait. We get in there, and the breakfast was amazing, dude. I mean, it was like, everything was bad that morning. It was like a short time of badness. We get in there. Breakfast is amazing. They had like all you could eat, these like long, skinny trays of pastries that were shiny, which means they're extra good and all this stuff. Best breakfast we had the whole time. We get out of breakfast and we go into the park, and all the rides are open, and we're by all the little kids' rides, and there's no lines because the park wasn't open yet. So we got to go on a few. And then the park opened, but it takes like 30 minutes or so for everybody to make it to the very back of the park, which I did the whole way on a tram with sunblock in my eye. Get back there. We're all enjoying ourselves. Then we get off one of the rides, and we came out, we're like, oh, all the people are here, and there's like lines and everything. And like the park's back to the way it's supposed to be. And that's like dictating our trip is like, what's got the smallest lines? Like the whole thing with what's happening with the economy right now and like what the Fed's doing is the exact same thing, right? So the economy was doing what it was doing. And then you show up and there's this big suck moment, right? When COVID hit, rates went up. We went into this like really quick forced recession where the government's like, everybody stay home, don't work, don't manufacture, don't create, but still spend, and we'll give you the money to do it. And so everybody went through this like great time where nobody was in the park hanging out. And then now we're coming to this time where like, okay, employment is in pretty good shape. Like everybody's still saying like, unemployment's so high, it's really not, like the unemployment rate is going down, and the job, and they're like, granted, yes, we need more jobs. Like there's been a large part of the labor force that has left, but we have a decent rate of unemployment, and the Fed doesn't need to accommodate the economy as much as they were. So it's time to start letting the markets dictate what happens, but it's not going to be this doom and gloom. It just may not be 18 and 19% returns. Like the oldest rule of money is the rule of sevens, right? If you make 7%, your money will double every 7 years. So like, that's like, I feel like my interpretation and the way I see it is that we're getting back to that more than seeing a crash or this big bubble or whatever it may be.
So, all right. So that's, first off, great correlation. Did you just think of that now, or did you have this planned? Be honest.
I just saw that.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's good correlation. So what is like, here's the thing I think that's undebatable, however, and maybe this is just a reaction to the market, but like, let's look at the stock market for a second and how all these companies' stock are just like plummeting as we speak. So when people say, the market's crashing, it's easy for you and I to sit here and say things aren't that bad. But when you look on your computer over your right shoulder,
no, I don't look at that.
The stocks are plummeting. So what's your take on what's causing that to occur? There you go. Yeah.
It's green now. I mean, look, so here's the thing. So when the Fed does talk and they do these press conferences where they have all these reporters ask this guy a bunch of really specific questions, but really they don't. So they ask him these specific questions and his answers are like, it's a wait and see type of thing. So like it goes to like a business philosophy that you and I both believe in, which is good news and bad news travel at the same speed. That's so right. Like if you wait to give people news or you wait to take an action, people are only going to assume the worst. And these markets are as emotional as anything else. So yeah, we are seeing some losses, and I think that's some people, maybe there might even be some like profit pulling from some of these gains that they've had in these stocks.
Okay.
That people are selling these to put themselves maybe in a little bit more of a conservative position while we manage these waters. I know that's what my position would be, is say, okay, let's pull more toward cash. Let's pull more toward like solid investments or steady investments rather than riding some of these highs and lows. But like you're seeing like the first part of this year here where, oh my God, are you kidding me? Where these stock prices are dropping, but last year was amazing. And the year before was even amazing, so we have very short-term memory.
Yeah. So I want to, and that makes sense. So here's the other thing I want to talk about is the video in which you and I watched. It talked about the Fed having to make a decision on solving one of two issues: solving inflation or letting the economy go into a recession. Yeah. And so your take on those two issues, where do you think we're headed and why?
Every time we've raised rates, we've put our economy into a recession. I mean, if you look at any of the past Fed chiefs, as they've started the cycle of raising rates, we've put ourselves into a recession. You have to do something when things are changing the way they are and you have really high inflation. What does that mean? That means people are buying more stuff than there is. So companies do the right thing and they raise prices because that's just business. And when people continue to pay those prices, you have to take the ability for them to pay those prices away. You have to make things cost more. You have to be less accommodative as a government. And there's no way around it. It's what we've done to ourselves with monetary policy right now is you have to put yourself into a recession in order to get the bearing straight. Does that mean the whole economy is going to go under or that the United States is going to go bankrupt? No, it's just there's certain sectors and there's certain things about the economy that are going to change. There's still people that are going to get rich and there's still people that are going to be on the complete opposite end of that. And most of us are going to fall somewhere in the middle.
You wanted to say poor.
No, because you never know. I mean, yeah. All right, poor.
Well, there's just two ends of the spectrum. It's not right, wrong, good or bad. It's just two ends. So you believe, you're under the belief right now. You said something to me on the phone. You said, I don't want to put the wrong words. You said we are getting into a recession. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah, and that's just looking at it historically.
And meaning what? So like for the people that maybe just aren't the economists that you are, like when you say, and when other people like economic experts say we're headed for a recession, what does that mean? And to your point, what you were just saying, what is that solving for?
So by creating a recession, you're essentially like the economy is receding, right? So it's a shrinking of the economy, which we're already starting to see like the GDP numbers that came out today were a little bit lower than what we even expected. And so that's your gross domestic product. That's everything the United States produces. So as that number shrinks, that's like a telltale sign of a recession. So what does that mean for you and I? It depends on what you do, but it's, we're at this place where we've seen really high wage growth. You're going to start to see wage growth pull back. You're going to see businesses like restaurants right now are already starting to see in like some service industries. eh, Part of it's inflation, and the other part of it is you're seeing it with the Omicron and like some of these variants and stuff where people are stopping going out, right? So now those companies are taking in less money. So there's going to be some attrition in like the small business world, mostly, unfortunately. You're going to see some of the labor market pull back and maybe not be so many opportunities for jobs and things like that. Is what the recession will mean. Does it mean everything's going to go bankrupt? Does that mean it's going to be 2008 again? No, I mean, that was like financial Armageddon, like that. It's not going to go back to that, but it's just recession just means recede, like growth
because what you were, yeah. And to your point earlier, you were saying because spending got out of control, really artificial spending, because the government said, hey, stay home and we'll give you money
and spend it.
And
don't save it.
Don't save it. So this meant, lowering interest rates, letting companies borrow more money, which then all of that, because of all the printing of trillions of dollars the government's doing, caused the inflation. Now it's essentially the opposite of that occurring.
Yes. And I mean, here's something else. This is like the news cycle is a big thing, right? Yeah. I mean, it's a massive moneymaker for everybody involved, including every talking head that gets invited to be on, Squawk Box and Barney and Company and whoever else, right? Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of headline there that's really, that makes people worry about it when really you, as Americans in general, like interest rates are going to go up some, but it's not going to slow down housing. I mean, there's still such a demand for housing. You're just going to pay a little more, there's so many things that it's not what the news seems. It's like everything else, right? Like the news makes all these like huge headlines and like all this doom and gloom, like, because recession is such a trigger word, but truthfully, a lot of people you're not going to feel it. It's not going to like you're not going to have any money tomorrow. Like they're doing all of these things that they're doing is to curb inflation, which you and I both know is crazy.
Yeah, it's got to get fixed. I mean, because inflation numbers actually are going up from the last time we even made an update. It's actually increasing. So this is like the counter attack to that. Yeah. And so, to your point, nothing is as it seems, right? And so the last thing I want to talk through with you is the Fed met yesterday. Yep. And so everyone was, I guess, I don't know if the right word is looking forward to it, but, curious nonetheless to see, okay, it's important. What's the Federal Reserve going to do about it? And so unpack that. What were the big takeaways, the big points from that meeting yesterday, if any?
So you just touched on one. So the Fed did say, from the end of December when they spoke till now, that inflation's gotten worse from the last reading. Like inflation is moving up, and they are starting to become more impatient with putting some of their tools back in their toolbox, like I always say. Yeah. So there's a few things they're doing. So number one, they announced, and one of it was kind of weird. They're going to reduce the amount of asset purchases they're making. So they're going to buy less mortgage-backed securities. Yep. Matters to me.
Yep, exactly.
And they're going to buy less 10-year treasuries, which matter to me a little bit. They're going to keep the rate the same, the Fed funds rate the same, and they're not going to raise it.
Where is it at right now?
Zero.
So zero, yeah.
So, and then they said they're going to raise that, in March. So that's like the plan, the market, and that's already priced into all the markets. Okay. But where the Fed really threw everybody off was, and there's not really a measure of this, like a Fed funds rate or like an exact amount of asset purchases, but is that they're going to let their balance sheet run off. And that's a big part of the liquidity in keeping interest rates low, right? So what happens is, and I'll make this really short and elementary, but basically like the government's buying treasuries and mortgage-backed securities. So it's the same as buying like a bank bond, right? So you buy a bond, you give the bank $1,500. They'll say, we'll give you a 2% return. So you get $1,530 back or whatever, just to make it super simple when your bond matures in say 6 months, right?
Yep.
So what the government was doing is they would get their money back for these mortgage-backed securities and treasuries that they bought, and they would reinvest them along with their returns, right? And you're like, well, what's $30 or 2 or 3% mean, Steve? Well, it's 2 or 3% of 8 trillion that they're reinvesting as their profits. And so one of the things they mentioned though is that in order to fight inflation without messing up like the geo economy, right? The world economy, because if they raise the interest rate, the Fed funds rate, that improves the spending power of the dollar, which will throw off a lot of financial markets, because like China and Germany, some other countries still have a negative interest rate. So we're going to raise ours, which makes our exports a lot more expensive for them to buy, and it messes up their economies really bad. You're yawning. That's an internal, you held that yawn in.
I saw it. Well, listen.
Anyway, so what they're going to do though is they're going to rather than keep reinvesting those and accommodate the lower rates, at some point, this is where their vagueness like really wins people over. They're like, at some point, we're going to stop reinvesting those and let that balance sheet run off. And that's what really threw the markets through a loop, because the last time the Feds did this, it blew everything up, and they eventually had to come back and stop and apologize and make a statement, let the markets recover, and then do a little more, make a statement, let the markets recover. You know what I mean?
Yeah. When you said blew up though, what happened as a result of the balance sheet runoffs in the past?
So yes, I mean, the stock market took a dive and really big time, but it recovered most of that by the close, as information digested. Interest rates got probably 0.75 to 0.3% worse on rates. And we gained, as of right now, we've gained most of that back today too. So, there's a lot of that knee-jerk reaction, just like any news thing. And then as the investors look at it, and these buyers and sellers of these different securities are like, okay, maybe it's not that bad, because he did come out and say, took kind of a dovish tone and was like, we're going to just do a lot of wait and see.
Okay.
And that's what all these people, this doom and gloom, they're like, the market, a bubble is going to blow and the markets are going to crash. And they're like, maybe, Yeah. So I don't know. That's my perspective.
And so, well, this is good. This is a good update. I wanted to get you on here because the Fed just obviously met yesterday. So there was a lot to share. There's a lot of scare. The markets are very concerned. So I wanted to bring just kind of an update so people can know what's going on, keep them educated. So we'll continue to do that. If you guys have any questions about any of the jargon that Steve was dropping, put it in the comments. Steve, I love you. We'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks for watching.
Right. See you guys.